Today, we have a wonderful conversation with MP Murray. MP played collegiate softball at Arcadia University, finishing with a 1.38 ERA and 236 strikeouts in only 3 years. After her collegiate career, MP has spent time as both a player and a coach at the international level, playing on the U22 Great Britain women's national softball team, as well as assisting as a coach at their U15 level. Off the field, MP is an assistant softball coach at Reachout University, as well as the communications director with The Hidden Opponent, a nonprofit organization aimed at shattering the stigma around mental health and athletics. Thank you for listening to the R20s podcast. Without further ado, MP Murray. What do I need to know about your childhood in particular? What type of events took place? What was your experience like in your childhood that you became so in touch with your emotions personally and towards other people? And at such a young age, you're able to communicate effectively to people of all ages. A very important message about having awareness of your own personal mental health and having awareness of other people's mental health.
I love this question because I never really thought of it as, childhood affecting that at all. I come from a family, it's not your nuclear typical family. I have a stepbrother, he's 10 years older than me. So we were in very different parts of life growing up. He was in high school, I was in elementary school, he was in college, you can compare. My childhood, apart from that, my family is very close. I live 2 blocks away from my parents right now, so like very close, emotionally and actually geographically. But our family pretty much all lives in the same area. My dad comes from a pretty big Irish Catholic family, so all of our cousins are really close. All of our aunts and uncles are very close. Like on Christmas Eve, we're all going to my cousin's house, and it's probably going to be like 40 of us in one house. But it's nice because like they're all going to Disney and we all do a lot of things together. And so I think I was also the only cousin my age. So I was the youngest grandchild. My grandfather on my dad's side was very much the kind of patriarch of our family. And so my grandmother passed when I was very young. I didn't really know her, but she was the matriarch, obviously, and she was very shaping. They both were in our family. And my mom's side, she has a twin and she has a brother who passed away when they were kind of young. And they were Navy kids. So 2 very different kind of backgrounds. My mom's family was very structured. And I mean, my dad's dad, so my grandfather was in the Army too. So both, structured backgrounds, but one was a little bit more strict and one was a little bit more relaxed, I guess. My dad was also the mischievous one of his siblings. So he always got in trouble and always told those stories to me growing up. I was very much not that way. But I think my dad's family, just because we're so close, like area wise, really shaped me. But again, like I was kind of saying, I'm the only cousin and grandchild that's my age. So everybody else was in college when I was in middle school, high school. Like all my cousins right now are married with at least 2 kids. And I'm not married, not even dating anybody, don't have children. So very different points in life. So I kind of I had to be mature, I guess you could say. Like if I wanted to hang around my family, there was nobody to be immature with because everybody was in a different phase of life. So I kind of had to like step into that if I wanted to, not if I wanted to be accepted, but just to kind of be on the same page with everybody else. But I think in terms of emotional intelligence, a lot of it came with, I would say, going to college and staying away. And, there's a stereotypical be comfortable being uncomfortable. You're never going to be comfortable in an uncomfortable situation, but it's about kind of trying to embrace the uncomfortability and understanding that that leads to growth and understanding that the hard will lead to the good. And so, especially for me, and obviously like your sister and I are very close. So, we talk all the time, and I remember talking to her when I was over in Australia and when I was in London, and studying abroad for me, I was very much a homebody, very much didn't only left the state of New Jersey for travel softball, basically. My high school was 24 kids in my grad class, so going to college for me was a huge transition. I struggled a lot my freshman year. My freshman year fall, I thought about transferring. Like I was struggling so much, and I was 45 minutes away from home across the Ben Franklin Bridge in Philadelphia. So it wasn't like I was, a flight away from home. I could go home on the weekends if I needed to. But once I had somebody kind of sit me down and say to me, a very trusted friend, loved friend, I had coaches sit me down and say, you can't keep going home. Like, you got to get over the homesickness, and you got to do it by staying here and toughing it out. And I was like, oh my God, that's so mean. Like, what do you mean? So that was a taste of Australia. Australia, I can say this being, God, 5 years out, I think, of going to Australia. Um, that's crazy. I went in the fall of 2017, so I was a sophomore. I was 19 years old, and I flew 24 hours across the globe with one
Ooh.
teammate who I knew and one friend. And thank God I had those friends with me. That was my first time ever leaving the country. The furthest away I'd been without my parents was South Carolina on a travel softball trip for 3 days. And I was leaving to go across the globe for 4 months. And I had said, I need to make the jump, I need to make the jump, but I didn't realize what the jump would entail. So I got there and I learned, like, I was a communications major, so I learned a lot about intercultural communication. And thank God I took it when I was over there, because I didn't realize until December that I went through culture shock majorly. So the first step is the honeymoon phase, they like to call it. So it's like you're on vacation and you think, oh, this is cool, I'm exploring new things, and then you hit a wall and it's the homesickness sets in. And so it's kind of like you're up and then you dip down and then you have to fight to come back up again. And so I dipped down hard. Like, I remember I had to find a counselor in Australia, and the cultural differences were, and I was kind of, before that, I was struggling a lot with my mental health throughout high school and starting college. And I made a decision for myself to say, you know what, I don't want to be on medication when I go to Australia. So I weaned off of it, and I had some in case I really needed it, but I'd been on it since my freshman year of high school. So at that point, 5 or 6 years. And I decided not to take it while making one of the biggest transitions in life that I've made so far. So I got there, and Australia doesn't really, I don't want to say doesn't believe in medications, but they're much more holistic in their approach for things. So it was a lot of like, I went to counseling, and I had professors who were very good with international students, and they talked to me about, missing home and navigating stuff, because it wasn't like I could just call home. It was a 15, 16-hour time difference. So, 5 a.m. here was 9 p.m. where I was on the next day, too.
Yeah.
So, like, my dad joked saying I was the first person that wished him happy birthday. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm a day ahead of you. So that definitely made things hard. I was in a relationship at the time, too, trying to go, like, you talk about long distance, you can't get much
You
longer
can't
than
get much
that.
longer than that. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was a lot of stuff balancing, but I was looking up flights in October trying to like get home because I just thought I couldn't do it. I had program directors. The program director that helped me through Australia, I still talk to today. Um, she used to take me out for coffee and just talk to me and say like, what's going on? Like, and I had a weekend, I won't forget it, when I was there. We went to, it was called Byron Bay, and it's the easternmost point in Australia. And so we went on an excursion and we went out to a lighthouse. And, I live right near Philadelphia, so I can never see the stars. Like, it's just such a city thing and all the light pollution. But we were in the middle of, I don't want to say nowhere, but middle of nowhere, kind of. And we could see like Saturn and Mars, like
Wow.
with the naked eye, without anything. And I remember just sitting there and I was like, okay, I need to stop worrying so much about what's going on at home and missing home, because like not a lot of people get to do this, and I never know when I'm going to make it back here, and I need to just be where my feet are and enjoy the now. And a lot of those uncomfortable situations that I was put in abroad, of figuring it out, and being in unknown situations that I'd never been in, really kind of made me grow, and it also made me reflect. So, talking to people from different cultures really taught me, okay, America isn't the end all be all. There is a whole other world out there, and I know nothing about it, so I can't act like I know everything about it. So Australia was kind of, I would say, the struggle point. And I remember looking back the year or so afterwards, and I was like, I loved Australia, but like, oh my God, that was so hard. I don't know if I could do that again. But then I went into London, which is an 8-hour flight away, which seems like a baby flight compared to that.
Yeah.
And it was a 5-hour time difference. And I was like, if I did that, I can do this. Like, are
Yeah.
you kidding me?
Oh my god.
So London was more of a, okay, I've been through it. I know what it's like. Now let's enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a time where I could more freely jump out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I would say those really started the process of the emotional, maturity and being more aware of myself. But then I would also say being a COVID grad and being a college athlete who lost their career to COVID definitely made me more emotionally intelligent. Um, there's a lot of, stigmas and a lot of things and messages within athletics that aren't really life lessons or things that we would be saying for our lives. Like, we wouldn't be saying, oh, suck it up if you're going through something hard in your life. Or there's just a lot of things that we teach athletes that don't really translate over to self-care type stuff.
Yeah.
Like the mental toughness kind of, how that can sometimes shift into like just bottling up your emotions and not caring. And um, I had no idea how much of my identity I put in a sport and being an athlete. And then when it was taken from me like that, um, it crushed me. Like I was in a very low place. I had no idea what to do. Um, I was super angry, super sad, super depressed. And then I had that fifth year option. And I was like, well, I have to take it. Like, I have to get back on the field. I don't know what else to do. And I verbaled to a school. I went in the transfer portal. That was a whole process in and of itself. And I verbaled to a school, was going to get my master's there. And then I kind of stepped back in July and talked to people who, like you have that small circle of people who
Yeah.
will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And I talked to them and they were like, you have a lot ahead of you in life that maybe isn't softball related. Touche. Here I am as a college softball coach. But in August, mid August, maybe 3 weeks before I started the semester, I made the decision to withdraw from that school, not take my fifth year, and challenge myself in another area. I didn't even expect to get into the graduate school that I attended. It was a reach school for me. And when I got the letter, I was like, they must have sent this to the wrong person. There's no way. But I decided, you know what? If they let me in, like, I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to go to Hopkins and I'm going to get a degree from Hopkins, no matter how hard it is, because I did Australia, I did London, and I'm navigating COVID. I can do hard things. So what's this? So that was kind of, I think, a lot of the study abroad, the COVID stuff, and being an athlete and really questioning what being an athlete is and how that relates to you as a human being really, really made me reflect deeply and kind of garner that emotional intelligence and learn more about myself.
There's a lot of fine lines that we walk that you covered right there. And the one I want to start with is the line between doing what's comfortable and doing what's uncomfortable. It's a complete difference maker, I think, at this stage in our lives where you have the safety net of your family. We're fortunate enough to have the safety net of our family, first and foremost.
Yeah.
That should never be taken for granted. There are a lot of people who don't have that safety net, and they don't have that decision to retreat back home or to go out in the world. They just kind of have to figure it out on their own. When you have that safety net, it's so comfortable to run back to it. And when you fall back into it, you're in a way hindering yourself from growing and progressing into the person that you either want to become or someone who you don't even know that you could become because you're missing out on certain experiences because you don't want to go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think the line crosses over a little bit is what you said about when it comes time to reach back out to someone. And you're going through these amazing experiences, these once in a lifetime experiences. Australia is my bucket list, like getting there 100%.
10 out of 10
Get,
recommend. You can
yeah,
go.
absolutely. We'll have to catch up after this on
Yeah.
the travel recommendations. But you do all these incredible things, and in the moment, it's so scary. There's plenty of things. I lived in a van when I graduated college, and when you get out there, you're like, oh, this is so much fun, and then you're there, you're like, oh my god, I'm in a van in the middle of the woods, and like I'm so far away from my family. It's scary in the moment, but once you get through it, and now you're on the other side, like you said, it's a beautiful thing that you said, all right, I've done this now. I can absolutely go and do this. If I can do A, why can't I do B? When it comes to the reaching out aspect, though, there are times where we reach out to somebody and we get hurt. We don't hear the answer that we thought we were going to hear. We hear suck it up. We hear, oh, just one of those days. It's something that's going to pass. It's something that gets suppressed. And when we have that type of interaction, it can hinder us going forward, saying, "Ooh, I had a bad experience last time I reached out."
Mm.
And, maybe it's time to reach back out to that same inner circle of people, but I'm a little scared. Like that, those are my people. Those are my rock solid people who I know I want to turn to for anything, but I'm a little scared to do it. Where do you think that line is with you personally, where you reflect on stuff yourself, and then you get to a certain point where you've reflected, you've thought through your emotions, you know the situation that you found yourself in, and now you say it's time. Okay, I'm gonna go reach out to my people, or I'm gonna go reach out to someone outside who I've never spoken to before, whether that be a counselor, a new friend that you've recently made, a teammate, a colleague, anyone of that sort of source. Is there a moment in your thought process where you say, all right, now's the time, or is it more just on a case by case basis?
I would say it's on a case by case basis, and it depends on the person, and it depends on, like you kind of touched on, prior conversations with them. I think sometimes people can think of their circle as, their friend group, where your inner circle is the people who like you trust with anything,
Mhm.
and the people who know you well enough to know how to talk to you in a certain situation. So I'll use Morgan is one of my examples. She is my inner circle. Like, I know when I go to her, I can either rant about a day that I had, or I can ask her for advice to navigate a situation. And I know that I'm going to get empathetic advice and replies.
Yeah.
Where some of my other friends, who haven't been in the same life experiences, student athlete, that's a huge life experience. And a lot of people who haven't been there may think that they know what it's like. And I'm not saying this is like a, you don't know, so don't talk to me type of thing, but it's just, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing is um, being open and transparent and honest and respectful, and not assuming anything as you have a conversation, and not jumping to conclusions. And that a lot of that goes back to again, in that small circle, really my inner circle is probably three people.
Yeah.
And one of them is Morgan, one of them is my best friend from college, her name's Becca. And those two are like my go-to's. Like, when I know I need to go to somebody, they're my go-to's, because I know that they have my back, and I know that they have my best interests in mind. And I know that if I need to hear something that I'm not seeing, they'll tell me. And they won't deliver it in a way that is hurtful. So, for example, Becca and I, we met, getting recruited, and then we played college softball together. And we both are very emotionally intelligent. So that really, and we're very in touch with ourselves and our emotions and our feelings. So that definitely obviously helps our friendship, and being able to go to each other. But we're also making a conscious effort to be good listeners for each other. So and one of the kind of turnoffs for me when I go to people is if I go to them and then they start talking about something that they can compare that experience to. Or, like if I go to somebody and I say, oh my God, like this morning I got up, and I'm a SAC advisor at work. So I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go in for a 7 a.m. SAC meeting. And, I could have texted somebody and been like, oh my God, like I was at work from like 6:30 in the morning until 5:30 at night. Like I almost had a 12-hour day, and I'm not even in season. And if I say that to somebody and they reply and they say, oh, well, I had a 12-hour day too, but I was like, it's almost like you could have it worse, and that
Yeah.
type of a response, then I automatically know, okay, you're not my emotional, empathetic person that I can go deep with. Um, so I don't want to say I don't give myself freely, but I kind of test the waters with somebody when I communicate before I dive and give them kind of the key to my emotions, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But Becca and I, for the listening part of it, the first thing, like she was texting me earlier today, and the first thing we will ever say to each other when we get texts, if we start talking about an experience, is, do you want to vent or do you want advice? Because it's like, if I just want to vent and you're trying to tell me what to do, that doesn't help me emotionally.
Yeah.
But then if I'm just throwing stuff out there and I need help and you don't give me advice, I still feel lost. So I think a lot of it is about understanding what somebody wants from their conversation from you. So that allows you to kind of toe that line more. But yeah, like your inner circle doesn't have to be 10 people. And your inner circle for different situations may change, you know? Like
Yeah.
my inner circle to talk about coaching is different from my inner circle to talk about my experience as a student athlete.
Yeah.
And my inner circle for studying abroad and knowing that experience is different than my inner circle for family. So it's all about shared experiences and kind of realizing that you don't have to have the same people that you go to for certain things, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Absolutely. I think you're very fortunate that you can even say that your core inner circle is two people.
Yeah.
There are definitely some people who would get asked that question and the answer is zero,
Yeah.
100%. And I think it comes down to one of the points that you made of, especially when it comes to topics around stuff that is so deep to us, whether it's something that we just want to vent about or something that's been really dragging us down mentally. We feel like people just don't understand what's going on in our own head. How can you explain something if you have no way of confirming the person has felt the same kind of emotion? Because we're all different. It's not your sadness is the same as my sadness. First
Hmm.
of all, what's the cause? What if it's a completely different cause? It's a different type of sadness. We go about grieving differently. We go about the cycle of feeling emotions like sadness, to going up to joy, then going back down, then finding ourselves in the middle. When we try to open ourselves up to somebody and say, I just had a really tough one today. Like, I just want to tell you about it. And we have like that conversation played out in our head already. Like, we know what we want them to say, but if they don't give us exactly how that conversation is playing in our head, we're not going to go to them again. We're not going to
Yeah.
rely on them. And I think specifically with mental health and someone in your kind of role as a coach, when you have athletes who view you in a different status to them. Like, you're a bit older, you're much closer in age than the normal type of coach you would see in a college setting, but you're still at a different place. You're not one of them now. You're in a
Mhm.
different, you've gone through the process, you've seen the other side of it, what it's like. You have a fine line again that you have to walk of, all right, I'm here for you, but I'm also not completely in tune with you. There are aspects of your experience that are different than my aspects. I graduated 3 years ago. It was a different world 3 years ago than it is now. And I think
Yep.
that's more true than ever, because it really, it really is. You went through
Yep.
quite the experience. Everyone who was in college went through quite the experience compared to now. When you're dealing with your girls particularly, how do you go about juggling that own relationship in your head of, I'm your coach, but I'm also going to be more here from you, more here for you than anyone else in this whole facility, this whole building?
I love that question because it's something I struggled with so much. So, and I think also part of the to go kind of jump back to like having your core circle, part of that is understanding like if you go into a conversation knowing what you want out of it, then you already know the answer.
Mhm.
So I think it's a two-way street, you know, listening, being an active listener as a friend, but also if you're going into that conversation, you need to be receptive and open to new ideas and new things. And part of that is one of my things that I discovered. I did a lot of work with a very good sports psychologist in the Philadelphia area after college because, again, I struggled with that identity. And kind of losing that very suddenly. And I didn't really understand, you know, how to be a human outside of softball.
Yeah.
All of my worth and all of my value was my ERA, my record, my awards, and it shouldn't have been that way. But I was such a perfectionist that if I wasn't high achieving, then I was stressing and I was not in a good headspace because I felt like I was failing and I was letting people down. So part of that process of, and she calls it unbecoming or unconditioning, like shedding the conditional kind of things that you're taught and you don't question.
Yeah.
Um, so I did a lot of reading on that, you know, my first year after college to kind of learn like how much you're conditioned as a child and in your environments and how they just kind of shape you without you questioning anything. So there's a lot of things we're taught as children and as, you know, especially athletes that we don't question. We just think, okay, that's how it is. When
Yeah.
really that's not how it is, like in life. So one of those things for me was sensitivity and being a highly sensitive person. So we did a lot of kind of not enneagrams, but like personality kind of tests and seeing what your natural type is. I'm like blanking on what the exact kind of test is called, but I know that I'm a manifesting generator, is what it's called. And so, along with that, I'm very highly sensitive. So it made sense that, if I was told that I had a bad practice, I took it to heart. I took it personally because I'm sensitive, not because I'm weak, when that's what we're told when we're athletes.
Yeah.
It's because I care so much and I have so much emotion and I wear it on my sleeve and I'm just so empathetic and it oozes out of me that like I feel like I'm letting someone down. And it was never, and sometimes it was letting myself down and I held myself to a very high standard. But the sensitivity part of it I think was a huge thing and I still battle with it every day. Like, you know, we talk about athletes getting constructive criticism and getting coached. I never had an issue getting coached because it was always a collaboration and I wanted to learn how to be better. But sometimes delivery of coaching can be hard to take. And I know that, like, obviously I'm a coach. So I know that, if I say something more bluntly, that may not be the best way to deliver something to an athlete. But in certain situations, it may be the most effective. So I think, again, two-way street on delivery and how you talk, but also understanding like I'm a highly sensitive person, but just because somebody's correcting me or giving me another idea or, not agreeing with me or whatever it may be, doesn't mean that they don't like me. They don't,
Yeah.
see the potential in me, stuff like that. But in terms of the kids, going back to that, it's something, like I said, I struggled with massively. So I was a volunteer assistant my first year on staff with the school I'm at right now. That was 1 year, literally 3 months after college. I joined as a volunteer assistant while I was in full-time grad school. And that role was very relaxed because I wasn't there all the time. And I was more of I don't want to say more of a friend, but I was more close to them in age, like you said. I just got out of college, so they kind of looked at me as like, okay, when you were in this situation on the mound, like in the circle, what were you thinking? Where was your head at? Type of thing. So it was like a neat mentorship that I could play in. I've been there, um, but it was still different. The girls called me MP. They didn't call me coach because it was a relaxed culture, and I love our culture because it's so relaxed because they're not feeling that pressure and they're not tight because it's a culture of love and family and unity and having fun, which at the end of the day, like if you're not having fun, why are we here?
Yeah.
But when I made that transition from volunteer to full time, I remember asking so many coaches. I asked my boss, like she hates when I call her my boss, but I asked her probably a bunch of times, like should they call me Coach Murray? And I was in a mentorship triangle at the time, and the coach that I was in the triangle with, who's a very good coach, she looked at me and she was like, "Well, what's authentic? Like, what feels good to you? Like, is Coach Murray forced, or like you want them to be able to come to you, not build a wall?" And so
Yeah.
I was so concerned about being a young coach and being, a year or two older than them and trying to build that barrier of I'm your coach, I'm not your friend, that I was building barriers that may have affected them coming to me and building that trust. And so I grappled with that a lot that first semester. And then we went to our coaches convention last year. And I sat down with a coach that I still talk to, and she's one of the greatest in the game. And I asked her, I was like, how would you recommend like a young coach kind of, like builds that respect in the relationship? And she was like, by being authentic,
Yeah.
by just being you. Like, don't try and be and emulate another coach, and don't try and be somebody that you aren't, because then you're not in your comfort zone and you're not in your kind of mojo. But if you really hone in on what's important to you and what's natural for you and how you are as a human, then you don't have to, like, you're not going to use energy to, try and be somebody that you aren't. So for me, I went back from that convention and I sat down and again, I went to my inner circle and people that I cared about and who I knew me very deeply. And I said to them, hey, like, this is my mission statement as a coach. Do you think this like actually reflects me as a human being? And do you think this is accurate? And are there pieces or words even? Like, I was very nitpicky about it because every word that I had in that had intention. And so the first thing that I put is I prioritize building trust. I prioritize building trust with my athletes. And those relationships that I build with them need to be based on trust at the end of the day. And that's my number one.
Mm-hmm.
And so every year I kind of tweak it. Like this year I'm waiting until after convention to kind of tweak my mission statement. But it it was, I kind of had the aha moment of, it's not about building up and demanding that respect. It's about being vulnerable and showing them it's okay to be vulnerable, and having that real human connection. Like they all know I am their coach. If they disrespect me, that's not going to fly. They know that.
Yeah.
And none of them would ever do that. But yeah, I would say the trust is definitely a huge thing. Like there are boundaries, obviously, but it's also, letting them into, like, I talk about my dog. We show pictures of our dog all the time. Like
Yeah.
we're, both me and our head coach have dogs, and our kids have met our dogs. Like we take them, our, my parents will bring the dog to games sometimes or whatever, and they've met him. And so like they know about us as human beings and who we are outside of softball a little bit. And we know that same thing about them, who they are outside of school, outside of softball. It's not just about who you are on the field and what you do on the field. It's about what are you doing off the field? Like, how's your family? Because at the end of the day, that's one of our biggest core values in our program is family.
Yeah. Authenticity and identity that you talked about are two aspects, I think, of every young person's journey that we're still going through. We're still trying to find out what your identity is, what's truly the core focus of your beliefs, being firm in your beliefs. It's hard to be firm in your beliefs, but specifically with identity, athletes, and I can relate to that as well, where you become so consumed with the work you put in. You put in so many hours behind the scenes. You do all this work with all these people, and you only have so much time to show for it. Whether there's a couple of games a season, whether it's a race here and there, but once it's gone out of your life, especially at the competitive level, there is that sense of, okay, what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
Of, all right, this is who I've been for so long. This is what I've identified with for so long. I've put in so many hours into this one thing, and now it's just kind of gone. And I don't think a lot of people can relate to that because maybe they don't have that hobby in their life. They don't have that passion that they've pursued from beginning of childhood to mid 20s. If you're going through your collegiate career, if you go beyond it, oh my gosh, and then it gets
Yeah.
taken away from you. How do you identify with yourself? And it's that aspect that you just talked about right there with, you're an athlete, but you're also a family person. You're also a friend. You're in college, you're a student first and foremost. You're a scholar. You're studying a field, presumably outside of athletics. Uh, you are uh, creative. You are a thinker. You're a person. Everyone is a person.
Yep.
And for me, this whole experience with the podcast in particular has been something for me to see how other people identify themselves. What works for them in terms of finding joy? What works for them in terms of getting back to that state where you look back and you say, wow, I got through yesterday, so why can't I get through today? I have been here, done that. I'm ready to take on the next challenge. Yeah, that might not be a part of my life anymore, but I'm ready to go do the next thing. Look how hard I worked in the athletics aspect of my life. I'm ready to go coach these girls now. I'm ready to show them what the ropes are like. I'm ready to lead them and hopefully put them on their journey. So when it comes with you, what I hear from you is just you're so in tune with yourself in a lot of different aspects of your own life, and I think that's really hard for a lot of people at such a young age to be able to do. It's something that I continuously struggle with, trying to pull myself out of these holes where I go down a rabbit hole saying, "Oh my gosh, I was bad at this one aspect of today. I might have been good at 99 other aspects of today, but I wasn't perfect today." And athletes and perfectionism in particular, it's something that I think every athlete who is dedicated beyond belief to their craft, it doesn't matter if you went 2 for 3 with 2 home runs, you still struck out, and you're going to think about the strikeout a
Yep.
lot. Especially if you lose the game, oh my gosh, you're going to think about the strikeout. If you're pitching and you've thrown a one hitter, but the one hitter is a home run, and that's how you lost the game, you're going to think about that. How do you go about preaching that message of, you know, you're doing fine to your girls? Like, You don't have to be perfect every day. You're not going to be perfect every day. It's impossible to think that. And for me, perfectionism, I'm so critical of myself. And perfectionism has been my biggest enemy towards finding joy in my day-to-day routine. So I'm interested to see your relationship with perfectionism in particular and how you've gone about relaying that message as a coach.
I like to call myself a recovering perfectionist.
That's a good. I'm gonna steal that one.
I mean, yeah, it's true because like you're never gonna just stop being a perfectionist. There's always gonna be that one part of you that's like, ah, like you
Yeah.
just hold yourself to higher standards and you expect that standard to be met, and when it's not, you're upset. I will say in college I was, and I think it goes back to the stigma in athletics. You know, like you're dedicated to your craft, like you said, you hold yourself to a high standard, and to succeed in athletics, you may need to hit a certain standard. So then it's so easy to become obsessed with that standard and think about the end goal and not the journey that it takes to get to that goal. And that journey that it takes to get to that goal is not going to be this way.
Yeah.
It's going to go here, 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 up, down. Like it's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So, throughout my whole college career, I was an extreme perfectionist. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. I can think of so many games. I will tell you, it's funny that you said, one hitter, blah blah blah. And Morgan knows this story. My freshman year, I was starting for our team, and we played I think they were probably the number, I don't know, 4 ranked team in the country or something in our conference. They had won the national, or they were national runners up in 2016. We played them in 2017, and so it was a huge game, and it went 19 innings.
Wow.
And I pitched all 19. I threw over 300, 400 pitches.
That's gotta be a record.
And oh my God, I was dead. But we lost 1-0
Oh no.
on a passed ball. So earlier I literally, like, people couldn't talk to me after that game. I was so mad. And I remember my assistant coach pulled me aside, and she knew when to give me tough love, and she knew that I needed to be snapped out of this. And so she looked at me and she was like, "You are not allowed to be upset about that game. Are you kidding me? You just held one of the best teams in the country. Like, the amount of times they had second and third with no outs, and somehow we would get 3 unproductive outs that they wouldn't score the girl. Like, it was a crazy game." And so when she looked at me and she was like, "You're not allowed to be upset about this. Are you kidding me?" Like,
Yeah.
that was one of the best games I've seen in a long time. And like, you just played a 19-inning game. You threw 400 pitches and you were on for 19 whole innings consecutively. And they thought about pulling me out, but like, I was grooving. I don't know how. The adrenaline was pumping, but I still remember that.
Yeah.
And there were other games. I think the kind of difference in dynamics between that and my senior year, before it was canceled due to the pandemic, we went down to North Carolina and we played one of the top ranked. They were number 2 in the country. And I was coming off of my junior year. I will say perfectionism really took a hold on me in my college career, but my sophomore and junior years, I was working through a pretty severe injury. I came off surgery after my sophomore year into my junior year. And so it was a struggle for me to do this, but I really looked at myself and I was like, this is a new hip, like a new body. I can't expect my body to do the same things at the same intensity that it was doing before this, because like literally like had bone shaved off, had like an anchor put in my hip. So I can't expect my body to do the same things that it's done before.
Yeah.
So that one tiny sliver of grace actually freed me so much for my junior year. And I was ranked in the top 10 for national ERA, and I had a 0.68 ERA for the entire year. And it wasn't like I threw 2 innings. I threw 140 something innings.
Oh
So,
gosh.
and it was like, I because I didn't hold myself to that high standard, and I wasn't, beating myself up. There were points in the season, I will admit, that, I see my ERA, and I got to a point where I said to everybody close to me, do not tell me my numbers. Do not tell me where I'm at, because I knew that would kind of trigger the perfectionistic kind of tendencies.
Yeah.
But when somebody did tell me my number, I remember there were a couple games that I was throwing and there'd be a runner on second. I'd be like, oh my God, I haven't let up any runs, like any earned runs. And there were a couple times, and I literally, right after I thought it, I was like, nope, no, you can't do that. That I was like, was that run earned or unearned? How's that going to affect my ERA? And it was like, it's not about that. And
Yeah.
once I kind of thought, and that got through my head, it's not about that, then it was so free. But then coming back for my senior year, that game against the number 2 ranked team in the country, I got obliterated. And I missed out on being an All-American my junior year. I was very, very upset about it because that was my one athletic goal in college. That was my biggest goal, and I felt like I had a real chance to achieve it my junior year. I was first team all region, which gets you on the ballot for being an All-American, but I was not chosen. So my goal for my senior year was, I'm going to be an All-American. I'm going to prove them wrong. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then the first game I pitch, I get 3 home runs hit off of me, and we lose 7-4. And I hit a 3-run home run in the game. So it was like I was either, riding a real big high or I was just on a really big low. And my head coach pulled me aside after the game. I was obviously very upset that we lost. And I wanted that game so bad because I wanted to prove, I'm here and I'm like, watch out.
Yeah.
And my coach looked at me and she was like, how do you feel like you threw that game? And I was like, I feel like I threw great. They were just hitting they could hit, 4 balls off the plate and they could hit 1 inch off the ground and they could hit anything that they should not have been, supposed to hit. And she looked at me and she was like, did you wonder why I didn't give you their stats before this game? Every kid on that team was hitting over 500. Wow. Every kid. There was a kid hitting 750. And again, didn't have 2 at-bats. That was her career batting average, and she started basically every game. And she's the one who had 2 home runs off me. So she looked at me and she was kind of just like, I want you to go based off of how you feel and not off of what. Gotta love dogs.
You gotta love them. You have to.
Okay. Oh, why are you going that way? Okay. We're just gonna sit right here. We're gonna, yeah. So it was like, once I focused on the feel and how I felt throwing and how I felt performing instead of the results, it kind of made the perfectionism wean off a little bit. So that's what I tell my kids. Like, a lot of the times we keep a lot of data on them. We're lucky to have some technology that's really helpful, and I'm still learning a lot about it, and it's a really great tool. But I don't let them see their stuff because, especially like there's certain majors and certain tendencies for certain kids that they want to see data and they obsess over data. And so I don't show them any of their data until like after season, or if there's something that I think should be brought up. And if there is, I show them the certain part of it. So I don't, for example, this machine keeps like spin kind of rates, axes, velocities, and a whole bunch of different information. So it can be very overwhelming. And there's something I'm trying to really teach them to get away from the perfectionism is there's no one right way of doing things in sports.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you watch the MLB, Bryce Harper's swing is different than whoever's swing. But, I mean, you could look at Harper and Castellanos. They're completely different. I'm a Phillies fan, by the way, so that's why I'm using them. But you look at Harper and Castellanos, and they're completely different, and they have 2 very different swings, similar in some ways, but they're both successful. Same with pitching. Like, they talked about last year at our convention, some of the best Division I pitchers throw a rise ball, and it's not what conventionally and traditionally a right rise ball would be considered. But it still works, and they're still All-Americans, and they still win national championships. So I try and tell them, like, it's more about learning more about you as a pitcher and where your strengths are and making those strengths better, instead of this is what I'm supposed to be and this is what it's supposed to, like, who says that? Who dictates what it's supposed to be?
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
So why hold yourself to this tiny, like, then you're not having fun.
No, not at all. And I think the data ties really well into the idea of identity, especially in sports, where we play such a comparison game amongst athletes, where you'll see someone competing at a completely different level of softball, or competing in a completely different conference, such different circumstances of how they've trained, how they've gotten to this point that they are. And you'll look at your numbers and you say, oh, they have a 750 batting average. I'm sitting down here at 435. I'm not worth anything compared to that person. You're still batting 435. Like the person batting 750, who knows how they do it? Maybe they have a completely different technique. They're a slapper.
Yep. And
There's
that's
some
that old quote that, comparison is the thief of joy.
absolutely. That's exactly where I was going to transition into is what you have to be yourself.
Yes.
You're not we're not playing a game to become the next uh, Monica Abbott. No, if you're in a
Yep.
circle, if you're in a completely different sport, you're not in the next. You're not becoming the next Bryce Harper. You're becoming the next you. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's the same thing as people. And sports and life are the ultimate mirror of each other. I think there's not much more that can mirror something like sports does with life. You work in team settings all the time. You are constantly communicating with other people. You're trying to balance all these aspects of your life. And once you start playing the comparison game in sports, I guarantee you that's going to leak over into your personal life where you start
Yep.
saying, oh, I'm not good compared to the other team that we just played today. And you know what? What else I'm not good at? I'm not good at school compared to the other kid. That kid is so much better at school than I am. What am I doing here? You know what else I'm not really good at?
Sometimes it's not even the comparison. Sometimes it's like, for me in college, it was, oh, I had a really bad practice today. You know what else I didn't do good at? I didn't do good on this test today.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what else I didn't do good at? I didn't beat my PR in lift today.
Yeah.
And it just compiles.
It snowballs so quickly. And to me, reflection for me has had me thinking about those moments where especially in college where sports become more of a job than they are when you're in high school, whether you like to admit it or not. To anyone listening who goes through sports, especially at the collegiate level, there's just an added pressure, especially if you're on scholarship. There's so many things get added into it. You're performing not just for you anymore. You're performing for a school. Maybe you're at a bigger program. You got people who are counting on you financially. So many additional factors. You let something snowball out of control like that, and you'll find yourself very quick, if not at damn near close to rock bottom,
Yep.
very, very fast. And there's so many times where I think about them now in college where I didn't perform to the level I wanted to, athletically, academically. I didn't hold up to a certain standard of relationships that I wanted to have with friends, family, everything like that. And I would let it leak over into so many different aspects of my life. And that's how I found myself struggling with mental health as a whole, where it was just one thing after another, and it felt like it would just not stop. And every time you try to take a step back up the ladder, you're just like, but I'm really bad at this too. Like, and this was really
Yeah.
bad today, and you miss so many of the good things that happen. And the one thing, and I still think it's really sad that it is what it took, but it was March 12th, 2020,
Yep.
where that day happens, and the whole world goes on pause. Everything that you had, gone, shut down. You don't know how long it's going to be before it comes back, if it even is going to come back. And I think this is a really good transition point where I read your open letter that you put out on the hidden opponent, and it encompasses all the emotions of that day, of that time period, especially in the immediate aftermath. And immediate meaning months afterwards, where it felt like a couple days had turned into months, where it's turning into a year of just what am I doing? Like, who am I during this time? Everything that I thought I knew was taken away. And, you know, reflecting on that time, I'm so fortunate that my family remained healthy, everyone that I cared about remained healthy, and all my loved ones remained healthy. And when I think about it now, the aspect that I think about the most is just the time in my life that it hit. It hit at a similar time in our lives. We're in college.
Mhm.
You're a senior. It hit my junior year. Uh, I think high school seniors, college seniors, it can't have been a more uncomfortable time for something like this to happen, because you are in such a routine of everything going on in your life. It gets all brought to a halt, and then it doesn't come back. It's gone forever. You had no say in it going. Your letter is very open and honest about what happened that day. Of you get the news that this is going to be your last game of the season right now. You're gonna have to go out there, um, do what you have to do, and then you're gonna have to say goodbye to all these people just like that. You thought you had a whole season ahead of you. You thought you had a potential All-American campaign ahead of you. You have all these things ahead of you, and it just gets ripped away. And I know a lot of people can relate to stuff getting ripped away, but I would hope that some of the people that had it ripped away at that time got it back. But college seniors didn't get that chance. From your standpoint now, you're a couple years removed from that day. Have any of the emotions changed, or is it still the same kind of feeling when you think about that day? That it was just, talk about a shock. And like, that's the best word you can use. If you
Yeah.
could just talk about that experience.
I will say that piece that I wrote for the hidden opponent was one of the most difficult things, and I express a lot of my emotions through writing. I do a lot of journaling, so that was. It took me months, like you said, to even sit down and write that, and it took me. I did not write that in one swoop. Like there were times where I hit a point writing that, and I just started bawling, and I was like, emotionally, I can't go there right now. I
Yeah.
can't do it. Um, it took a lot of talking with, again, Becca was a senior with me. We both went through that exact experience together. So while I did have other friends who were seniors who, lost their sport and were, you know, in the same boat, it it just hit different with her because she was literally at third base and I was pitching, and
Yeah.
we had to figure out a way. Like we were both bawling our eyes out. Who wouldn't be? Um,
Yeah.
and I think kind of a backtrack, like something that frustrated me a lot in those months was, especially like obviously, like you said, very grateful that my family was healthy through that time. Everybody around me that I knew was healthy, um, but at the same time, anytime that I spoke out and said, "This sucks," like I just lost something that I literally have done since I was 4 years old, and I had this ending imagined, and I even one of the things that really still breaks my heart is, I went through 3 years and I saw the seniors get senior days, and
Yeah.
I saw them get celebrated for their careers, and I never got that. The All American thing, that's where my identity was, and that was my goal, and that's where I valued my worth. And so since I didn't have a chance to meet that, I was like, well, what was it all for? What was it worth? And it took um a lot of self-reflection and a lot of hard, deep, conversations with myself, conversations with others. That was not a pretty time for me. And as
Yeah.
someone who's dealt with mental health since high school, I had no idea how low I was getting and how bad I was until, the summer. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm actually deep depressed. Like on the day that was supposed to be my senior day, I didn't leave my room. I was bawling my eyes out for hours because it just affected me so deeply. And I remember somebody said to me, you know, at least you didn't lose, like, at least you're safe. At least your family's safe. And I was like, I saw something on like Twitter or something, and it said, you know, um, we all go through a storm, but like a little Yorkie, it's gonna flood them and they're gonna be underwater. But if you're a Great Dane, it might go up to not even your stomach. So everything, life experiences affect people differently. And it really, really hurt me when people would say to me, oh, well, at least this didn't happen. Or like, you can't get worked up about that when all this is happening in the world, and kind of invalidating that emotion. So moving forward from that, like I was very much like, you know what, I don't understand what you're going through, but if this is something that affects you so much, like I, I'm willing to listen, and I'm never going to fully understand the emotional impact of it, but I'm here. And that's
Yeah.
a bigger thing than, trying to understand. Um, and for me, the emotions, it, like I said, it took me a long time. That day comes around, especially the year after I graduated, and it was so hard, and it still is. I still, at this point in the year next year, we're going to be down in Florida playing. I never got my senior year Florida trip,
Yeah.
so it's like I love where I am at. It's that weird thing of like you can still go through a grieving process, but also move on at the same time. And grief is a funny thing where it's not linear. It's not, okay, I'm grieving and I'm done and I'm never going to grieve again and let's move on. It's little things that come back and kind of remind you, and that like you said, I was very, very open and very raw and very honest in that piece. And I found that that openness and that honesty moving into my coaching career um, really gave me a strength as a coach because I was coaching kids who had their seasons canceled by COVID.
Yeah.
And I was coaching seniors who decided to come back for a fifth year who were still going through that. So having that kind of shared experience, even though it wasn't a shared exact experience, they felt safe coming to me and saying, that was hard. And I'm like, yeah, it was. I feel you. I legitimately feel you on that. And
Mm.
they knew that I wasn't just saying it. But yeah, that day definitely shaped me, and really put me in an uncomfortable spot. But yeah, it was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through in my life.
That day, the impact that it had on so many of us, it's uncomparable to anything that's happened in our young lives. And um, the thing about it is the comparison game again that we were talking about before, where you look at the situation that you find yourself in, that anybody finds themselves in, and you can always say that it could be worse, it could be better. You're always going to find yourself in the middle, and just because you're in the middle, that doesn't invalidate the feelings that you're having. It's completely natural. It's your circumstances, it's your life, and nobody knows the road that you've gone through to get to that point. Nobody can truly understand anything. But what makes all the difference is you can just listen. You don't have to you don't even have to agree. You just have to listen sometimes. And when somebody does something like you did and put out such an open and honest letter, people will say, "Oh, it's writing. You can't listen to writing. That doesn't make any sense." But that's not the case. You have put out a message, and the best thing that you can do as a consumer of that message is just listen to the message. There is, I guarantee you, if you go check out the message, it'll be linked down in the show notes for everybody to check out. There's at least one aspect that you can relate to. You might not be able to relate to the entire pie in any situation, but we can all find common ground in one aspect at least, a slice of the pie.
There's a funny side note with that too.
Yeah.
When I shared that, I actually got a DM on Instagram, and it was from so if you read the story, you'll kind of very, very, very loose summary. I was on the field when I was told that our season was ending. So talk about, all the stigmas around athletics of being mentally tough and not crying on the field. I broke all of them.
Yeah.
There was no way. Like, you're telling me that I need to now go out and pitch when you just told us that our careers are done and we have no control, and you're expecting me to perform. Um and for me, like, one of the hardest things, it's funny talking about kind of grief like I did before. My walk-up song was Home by Machine Gun Kelly. It has been almost 3 years since I've graduated, and I still can't listen to that song without crying,
Yeah.
because that was my pitching song. And I go through it in the story, and the lyrics, and there was a reason I picked it and I stuck with it for a couple years. It was because of my surgery, and I was playing through a surgical injury, and I didn't know why I was playing. I forgot my why, and it kept me grounded, and it reminded me why I go through the struggles that I do and why I love the game and why I push myself. And then I got on that field and started playing, and I was gone. But after someone read that story, we played Misericordia.
Mm-hmm.
They were a conference rival of ours, and one of our kind of team not goals, but team standards was we never get swept on our home field. We got swept that day. But, COVID ended everything, so like
Yeah.
a little grace can be given there. But a couple weeks after everything ended, or actually no, a couple months after I posted that story, I got a DM from somebody random, and they said, "Hi, my name's so and so. My daughter played on the team that you guys played the day that the season ended, and she was a senior. And every single thing that you wrote in that letter, she completely understood, and she felt so validated and so cared for and seen because of you being open and vulnerable and telling that story." And I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God. Like, you're telling me that day you were on the same field as me, And like, I was just, that shook me to my core when I got that message.
Yeah. You never know until you put something out there who's going to relate to it. And if you never say it, if you bottle it up and you let it eat at you, you never know who you're going to touch. And I think it kind of relates back to data, where we live in a world, especially now, where we're consumed by numbers in all aspects of life. And something like social media, or something where you put out a letter of that sort and you can see the number of people who have viewed it, maybe some people are afraid of, oh, what if this person sees it and I could tell that they saw it and now I have to worry about
Yep.
what they think about it? Or what if nobody sees this and I'm just talking into the void? Again, it's perfectionism. You want to put out the perfect piece that everybody's going to see, everybody's going to love. And if you let that perfectionism detract you from even putting it out there in the first place, you never would have touched that person. You
Yeah.
never would have touched me, who I connected to that so well in a couple different aspects. And I'll cover both of them. The first one for me, similar situation, was when that happened. I was a junior, and we did our spring break rowing practice. It was like our first practice back on the water and everything. And they just told us, like, we're going home. Like, it was gonna be like 2 weeks. We'll come back.
Yep.
And the hardest part for me was when we didn't come back. Is I was coming back for senior year, but I didn't get to say bye to anybody who was leaving. And that senior class was with me the entire time. They were massive. There was 13 kids or so. And it was 13 kids who had been so influential in that time period of my life, who I didn't get to say goodbye to. And some of them I haven't seen to this day.
Yeah.
Sure, we've been in touch, but I haven't seen them. I haven't given them a hug. I haven't just laughed with them. And the aspect of your letter that stuck with me the most was, it's the relationship with the people. And similar to what you talked about with home, COVID hits junior year. We go through senior year, and it's not the real senior year everybody had imagined. We're locked in our own off campus housing. You're only allowed to hang out with a couple friends at a time. You're not allowed to do any of the activities you're supposed to do. You're
Yep.
not even allowed to go to class normally, everything like that. We get to the point in May where it starts to get a little more normalized. And they do a tradition every year at Fairfield University where they do the senior sunrise. Fairfield's right on the beach, and seniors will go sit on the beach and stay up all night and watch the sunrise. And when the sun rises, it's graduation day. The moment the sun comes up, the song 19 You and Me by Dan and Shay is playing. And to this day, every time I hear the song, I cry. And I know that's so against the norms of masculinity. Some people will hear that and be like, "Are you serious? Like, you cried? Like, why?" That day, I lost it completely. That at the sunrise, and then when it was time to say goodbye to the people who had been with me through that entire time period, from the beginning of college through this really difficult time where everybody's struggling just to get their own footing,
Yeah.
because nobody really knows what's going on and where we're
Yep.
going to go from here. And just in the moment, I knew that, sure, might see these people again, might hang out with them, but it's never going to be this again. It's never going to be everyone in this room. If we get everyone in this room again, it's going to be a wedding or
Yep.
something significant. You're never going to be in the same room with all these people again. And you're never going to be 22, 21 with all these people, as free as you can be. And when it came time to say goodbye, I lost it. I absolutely lost it. And so my friends that day were looking at me like, "Bro, we're gonna see each other again. Like, what is going on?" And it's just like, it's just the circumstances around that moment, and you share the same kind of emotions when you're talking to your best friend Becca. You break down. It's so hard. The relationships that you form with people, especially in the athletic setting, you work with them. You go through so many highs and lows, both off the field, on the field. You spend so much time together, and you're losing a family member at that point. Once you spend so much time with you spend more time with them than your family when you're
Yep.
in college and everything like that. And I don't like to say that I have regrets, but one of the biggest things that I wish I would have done differently, which I actively try to do now, is I don't let those little moments bother me as much as they used to, because they detract from those amazing moments with the people who make everything worthwhile, who make this life worth living. And if you're letting the little stuff of, I gave up one pass ball today, I
Mhm.
did this one thing wrong today, and you let it distract you from the 99 great things that should give you so much immense joy because they're such beautiful things. I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to look back on any aspect of my life again and say that to myself.
Yeah.
So that's my long-winded way of saying thank you for putting that letter out into the world. And I think everybody should go check it out because it's so true to, I think, any college student in particular, especially junior, senior year of college, junior and senior year of high school, really, and anybody who is at a transition point in their life. And that one day was a cause for you had to say goodbye and you never got the chance to
Yeah.
really appreciate it. Um, when you look back on March 12th, 2020 now, what would Mary today, or MP, sorry, I called you Mary. We talked about this before. What would MP today tell MP on March 12th, 2020 now?
I kind of touched on this in the letter. Obviously, it's since expounded. You talked about regrets. One of my biggest regrets, and I I'm afraid that I will regret it for the rest of my life, and I probably will. Is kind of like you said, I was so focused on the little things and on performance and on winning a championship and on these things that I wasn't embracing being where my feet were and embracing the memories I was making and the with the people that I was with. And like now when I talk to we go back for alumni games, obviously we don't get the time back that we lost because of COVID, and we don't get the memories back that we would have made because of COVID, but we still get to see each other and we still get to get on a field, and it may be good and it may be bad, but um we go out afterwards and we're all like, oh my gosh, remember that time in Florida when like you guys made this in the house and like you did this, and do you remember when we went to this restaurant, do you remember when we did the hibachi dinner? And I remember like crying on March 12th, and I was like, oh my god, we're never going to get our senior hibachi dinner, and our coach was like, I'll take you to like, and I remember I never ever ever saw my coach cry, and that day she couldn't speak, she was so emotional. um and it hit me so deeply, but it also, I think, I want to say it broke us down so much that it really really kind of showed that raw, real authenticity of each of us.
Yeah,
We didn't have any more, you know layers to protect us. It was raw and it was hard. And I think, like I said, I touched on it in the letter. I didn't value the people and the relationships that I made as much as I should have when I was there. And something that I've realized being out of college is, I could go back to Arcadia and visit, but it's not the place that I want to visit. It's the people. I
yeah.
love the place. The place gives me memories, but those memories were with people. They were at a place, but they were with people. And some of those people aren't there anymore. A lot of those people aren't there anymore. Um, so that's one of my biggest regrets, I think, is not valuing the people aspect of it and the relationships aspect of it. And you can see that translating into my coaching philosophy now,
Yeah.
100%. That is one of my biggest focuses, is relationships and enjoying the process, because I look back on my junior year and yeah, we won a MAC championship for the first time in program history, but I was beating myself up that whole year to be the best pitcher I could be so that we won that. Where
Yeah.
last year we won an NJAC championship, and oh my god, did I have the time of my life that year. Yeah, there were ups and downs. There's always going to be hard moments. No moment's ever going to be perfectly joyous. There's always going to be, the ups and downs. But after I actually spoke at a class last night, and one of the students asked me, what has been the most influential or touching moment of your coaching career so far, Rowan? And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like that's a question. And I said, you probably all would expect me to say winning the 2022 NJAC. No. It was when we got knocked out of regionals in extra innings. One of the kids came up to me bawling and just gave me the biggest hug and said, thank you.
That's
And I
beautiful.
was like, this isn't even softball anymore. Like
Yeah.
this is like human to human. Thank you for helping me grow. And that was like, this is my why. This is why I do it. And I was crying too. I was like, thank you. So it was like, So I think, I'll always have those regrets, but I'm trying to kind of erase those regrets by living out those things that I wish I did, and making, like you said, making sure I don't make the same mistakes again.
Yeah.
And it's all a learning moment. And I've kind of learned, especially through that, the difficulty of communicating with people through that process and seeing your friends and being in person. The people who want to keep in touch and who are invested in you and who could be in that inner circle of yours that we talked about
Yeah.
will make an effort. And so it really taught me, I'm very much I give a lot. And so going back to like that manifesting generator, it's called human design. So if you can do human design, like, I can't recommend it enough. I did it with my sports psych, like I said, and it literally, like, hit me to a T. And funnily enough, I bought Becca a human design roadmap, which walks you through your human design, for Christmas. And she texted me and she was like, "Oh my god, like, this hit everything on the nail." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, it's kind of scary." But that was a huge thing for me. And it said, you're a giver. You like to give, give, give. You're selfless. And that's another thing with athletics. Be
Yeah.
selfless. Be a good teammate. Like, put others before yourself. And so I took that to an extreme. And once I finally realized, you know, I don't want to let people be an energy vampire to me, because that I can't function like that. And once I started putting myself first, because my cup needs to be full in order to give from my cup.
Yeah.
Like, or, the battery. One, like, the battery end of it is, I need to charge my batteries so I can give my energy. The one that I love the most, that our athletic trainer said, who I still talk to, from Arcadia, is, when you're on a plane and they go through the safety briefing, you put your own oxygen mask on before you put on others.
Yeah.
And so it took me that hard realization of, I need to take care of me. And if a relationship isn't serving me, maybe it would have if we had those 4 months together, but maybe it wouldn't have.
Yeah.
And I can't say what if. I can only go with where I'm at right now. And, you know, um, it's kind of just growing with that process. And like I said, grief's a weird thing. But growing with that process definitely has been something, that I look back on. And I don't think I'll ever be at a point where I can say I'm thankful for it, but I'm grateful for the lessons and the very deep, vulnerable kind of learning that I did through that process and through that
Yeah.
grief.
I think that's a really key distinction right there at the end, that you don't have to be thankful for it. We try
Yeah.
to, even my own motto for the show is trying to find the good in all things. There's not good that came out of that event. What was good and what is worth being grateful for is how that event impacted us, so we can pay it forward now. You learn
Yep.
from that time in your life, and now you can pay it forward to anyone who is in need of something, who's in just need of someone to listen, who's in need of a friend, who's in need of just a shoulder. um, and that's the ultimate gift that you can get from something like that. And I think you are perfectly embodying that, especially in your coaching career. I want to touch on it a little bit before I let you go. Just the work you're doing with the hidden opponent, where you're paying it forward. You're working with an incredible group of people to pay it forward to athletes all over the country, to help them be that shoulder to lean on with their mental health. Can you just tell me a little bit about the work that you guys do as an organization, particularly what you're doing, and any athlete who's not aware of the organization, just a little intro to something that they might be glad to hear is doing very well and thriving, that they can help join.
Yeah, we're so thankful. Like, we were actually just talking the other day. Like, we're at 50,000 followers on Instagram. We've
Wow.
been in the organization for 3 years, so that's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so the Hidden Opponent is a nonprofit organization that advocates, educates, and supports student athlete mental health. And like you said, we have such a great team. We are all former student athletes, so we all understand that transition process. We all understand how hard it is, how you're conditioned as an athlete to feel a certain way and to do certain things, and we all understand the struggle of it. Like, it's hard. Being an athlete can be glorified in the media, but it's not easy at all. Um, so we do a lot of advocacy, education, and we share a lot of stories. So my story was one that I wrote as an intern. and was published. But there's hundreds of other stories that we share, whether it be, being a student athlete and navigating an eating disorder, or navigating performance anxiety, or having to medically step away from your sport, or like, if you have gone through an experience and you want to know that you're not alone, go on that blog, because you will probably find someone who has been through a similar experience who you can relate to.
Yeah.
So the two biggest things that I would say about the Hidden Opponent are our two programs that we're running right now, which I have a hand in both of them. I'm lucky enough to work with, like you said, our great team, to kind of bring these programs out to the community. So the first one is our Campus Captains program. So that is aimed at student athletes. It can be high school or college, and that's our advocacy program. So you're kind of brought on as an ambassador for the Hidden Opponent, and you can do events in your community. We host a lot of events for our campus captains. So we've done panels on performance anxiety this year, on men's mental health. And you said before, when you were talking about your experience with COVID, like, oh, that's not masculine to cry.
Yeah.
Literally, I'm sitting here and I'm like clutching the chair. I'm like, no, 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 that needs to be broken. No, that's one of our biggest things is men's mental health, especially in athletics, because it's just the stigma is so still there. And we know it takes a team, and it takes an army to break that, and we're lucky to have a lot of people supporting us. But that's something that we cover with our campus captains, and we do a lot of sharing our stories nights, which are super special, where we get on Zooms with just campus captains. It's very intimate, and a couple who want to share their story with mental health come out and talk, and there's tears, there's crying, like, but it's so bonding and fulfilling. So the program's in its third year, and it's like, I love it. It gives you a lot of different perspectives and different information. So even if one of the first things we do is a mental health training. So the first half of that mental health training is, if you're dealing with your mental health, how do you help yourself? The other half is, if you have a teammate who's dealing with their mental health, how do you help them? So it's not just, okay, it's about me, I need to take care of my mental health. Great. It's, how do I help everybody else around me?
Yeah.
And so the other program that we run, which I'm really passionate about, is our Coaches and Professionals program. It's in its first year. It just started in September, but it's aimed at coaches, athletic administrators, mental health professionals, and support staff in athletics. So we're aiming to educate and just share perspectives with coaches and everybody in that community on a bunch of different topics, but specific to coaches, administrators, support staff. So what do you do if you have an athlete struggling with mental health? Where do you go? How do you get them the help they need? How do you support them in practice? How do you support them in games? How do you make sure that your team has a culture that fosters openness and vulnerability around mental health? All of these big topics, because it's not a one-way street.
Yeah.
Your student athletes can want to talk about mental health, but unless they have an arena that they feel comfortable talking about mental health in, it's not going to happen. So our big goal with both of these programs is to kind of marry them together and have both sides advocating and realizing how important it is, because athletics, they always say, you're going to learn lessons for the rest of your life. That is a lesson you're going to learn for the rest of your life, is how to take care of yourself and how to take care of your mental health, because that run test that you run is not going to be the only thing that causes you anxiety in life.
Yeah.
Or the perfectionism that you deal with in sport is not going to be the only time that you hold yourself to a high standard and fall short and have to navigate it. So those two programs, I think, are very impactful. And we have a lot of other things that we do. We partner with a lot of other programs. We were lucky enough, obviously, Victoria Garrick is our founder, and she has her own brand and does a lot for the Hidden Opponent. So there's a lot of different avenues we can take in different places where we all kind of specialize. So yeah, obviously you can tell I'm pretty passionate about it.
Yeah,
I can
sure
talk about it all day.
Yeah. As I've become more familiar with the organization's work, it's something that I would love to try to contribute to as much as I can. Try to, if there's donations, anything like that, try to help out. Even try to get involved. I think any athlete should try to get involved. It's such
Sure.
great work that you all are doing, and it's important work for breaking down a stigma around athletes in particular. that you have to put up this wall, that you have to be a role model in the sense of you are a brick wall of emotions and you are the peak of physical fitness or stuff like that. You're a role model in that you are a human and you are comfortable being a human around other humans. And I think you guys are doing incredible work, and I
Thank
think
you.
everybody should check you guys out. It really is something. Once again, a massive thank you to MP for sitting down with me for today's conversation. It was such a pleasure. I think everyone can have at least one takeaway when it comes to finding joy in our day-to-day lives. Links to all the topics discussed today are in the show notes. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more, definitely follow along and leave a rating on Apple or Spotify, wherever you may be getting your podcast. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, notification bell, all the cool YouTuber stuff. Thank you again. It really means a lot that you check out the show. It's such a pleasure to produce this for all of you. Until next time,